as you've heard, the topic for today is maybe a bit of a departure from the kind of things you've been hearing about this week. And the topic is the future of employment, and in particular how technological advances, notably those within machine learning and robotics, are likely to affect the future of work. So this is often portrayed in the media as being about robots stealing jobs. Perhaps you've seen headlines along those sort of lines. And I don't know about you, but sometimes in reading those kind of pieces, particularly when it's pretty late at night and my code is still not working as well as I'd like, and I know that if I were to change one initialization parameter just a teensy bit, it would work even worse. I can't help but think that this hype over algorithms actually taking people's jobs is a little bit overdone. Maybe you've had that impression as well. So to answer that kind of criticism, I thought I might start out with a plot from one of my favorite studies of all time, which was of a cohort of judges tasked with awarding parole. So the y-axis of this plot is the fraction of times that the judges did award parole to parole seekers as a function of, on the x-axis, the ordinal position during the day. So you can see that they start out the day fairly generously inclined, only for that to wear off. They're perked up by their morning coffee, only for that to last only fairly temporarily. Lunch is another boost, but that lasts only a very short period of time before the rest of the afternoon is more or less a complete write-off. So the first thing I want to say about this is that in today's proceedings, we're somewhere about here. So really, I've got no excuse whatsoever if you're not positively inclined in judging my talk. But the other more serious point is that humans aren't perfect, right? Human decision making is corrupted by all these kinds of heuristics and biases. And so even though the algorithms we develop might not be perfect either, they might still be better in some respects. And certainly that they're not going to be affected by how long it's been since the lunch break. So with that sort of motivation in mind, I thought I'd just roll through a few examples of where we're already seeing technology impacting on the world of work. And, well, actually, even before I do that, sorry, I've got this little exercise I'd like you to undertake. So just take a moment and think about what it would take for an algorithm to automate your job. Or, if you're not currently in employment, automate any job which you're particularly well informed about. So having spent a couple of moments on that, now what I'd like you to do is to turn to the person to either your left or right, hopefully we can organize this in a decentralized way, and try and convince them that their job is automatable, given technology that's currently available. So let's spend a few minutes doing that. Sorry to stop what I'm sure was a really interesting discussion, but could I now just get a bit of a poll of the audience? So could you please raise your hand if you were convinced by your partner that your job could be automated? Was there anyone? A few people, that's pretty good. That's pretty good, okay. Well, thanks very much for that. And now, what I thought I might move on to is just where I see, as I said, technology already kind of encroaching upon the world of work. So the first sphere I thought I might speak about is kind of retail and sales jobs. And, obviously there's been a huge boom in online retail in the last decade and a bit, driven by, for example, Amazon. And of course, machine learning has been at the heart of a lot of that, and making product recommendations that are superior to a human's, simply by virtue of having access to a much larger set of data than any individual human salesperson ever would. At the top right of the slide there, I've got a Xeos tablet. I'm not sure if you've used one of these things, but what they can do is essentially replace some of the tasks of a waiter or waitress in a restaurant by automating the taking of orders, taking of payment, and even potentially doing some of that recommendation, right? I mean, they can, by having you sign in, learn your preferences and recommend meals to you that they think they might like, that you might like. And the interesting thing actually with those kind of tablets is that in, allowing you to order, say, a triple chocolate sundae for dessert without actually forcing you to interact with another human being, some restaurants have seen dessert orders go up by as much as 20% when these technologies are introduced. So that's another way in which these technologies can improve upon the human level of performance. And on the top left of the slide here, I've got the more recent example of Amazon Go. So I haven't been to this store, perhaps some of you have, but it's a kind of convenience store in Seattle which is attempting to do away with checkout assistance altogether by tracking what you do in the store with data from your phone using computer vision algorithms from cameras deployed in the store, so that you can be automatically billed for whatever it is you pick up just as you exit the store. So if that technology proves itself, it's difficult to see it not affecting employment in retail worldwide. But it's not just kind of lower skilled occupations that are being affected. I thought I might speak a little bit about more traditional white collar occupations that are being affected by technology. A lot of people speak about lawyers being affected by technology, and I think that is very much happening. So in particular in places like not trial lawyer work, not standing up in front of a court, but anywhere that really just requires a lawyer to dig through files, for instance, like for example a paralegal might do, like a contract lawyer or patent lawyer might do. We are already seeing algorithms put to those kind of purposes. And there was this article in the New York Times a few years ago in which someone was bemoaning the fact that he can no longer bill out people to do document review just because the algorithms have got so good at doing it in their place. More broadly speaking, there are algorithms that are used to write contracts now. There are firms like Contract Express. Of course, a lot of preparing most contracts is routine. That is absolutely something that can be automated. And there are even more sophisticated ends of lawyering work that is beginning to be automated. So Allen & Overy, which is this big international law firm, is using a service that can apparently tackle quite complex multi-jurisdictional legal questions by digging through prior examples of such legal questions that's encoded in documents that the algorithms can read. So something that's perhaps been even more impactful in the last few years is what's known as robotic process automation. I'm not sure if this is something that's crossed your radar, but really what RPA, as it's come to be known as doing, sounds trivial, which is so there's a lot of clerical work that requires not much more than opening a file in Excel, copying the data into some other proprietary bit of software, literally copying and pasting data from one application to another. And RPA is kind of about learning to do that automatically. So there are these software bots that will observe how a worker does this task and over time automate it. So firms like Automation Anywhere, Datamatics, Blue Prism have, for some clients, automated as much as 35% of this kind of work. And the firms that have been affected very much see these bots as alternatives to workers. So some firms, give them names like Polly, I think, in one instance, and are actually seeing them as a replacement for some of the human workers that they'd previously used. My next example is accounting and auditing, another traditional white-collar occupation, in some cases relatively well paid. Again, one to which algorithms have been very heavily targeted in the last few years. So 48 million Americans in 2014 used services like TurboTax to prepare their tax returns. You can understand why. It's not a particularly pleasant thing to have to do, and accountants are expensive. There are other services like Cashflow, which are automating the processing of receipts and invoices. Again, something that's routine and able to be done by algorithms. More interesting to me are things like PwC's Halo for Journals, which is an attempt to automate some of the work that an auditor would do. So when you think about the limitations on a human auditor, really they're only ever going to be able to process a small sample, a mini batch, if you like, of a company's financial data. Whereas an algorithm is under no such limitation.